Mary Coultier stood at the small raised stage in the auditorium slightly off-center within the larger stage upon which the musicians were seated. A low-volume, slightly non-distinct merging of different patterns and tonality to create an ambient music behind her speaking. She wore a long-sleeved, simple beige linen dress, but with a brightly colored, embroidered vest worn over it. The audience was most of the 200 residents of New Oakport, ages 21 to 71. She spoke. "Brothers and sisters, I have great joy that you are here. The sacrifice of leaving home for many of you has been a grief. And for some, you have anxiety for the well-being of those you were family or close friends to back home. Please know, real voids are filled by others, but false relationship can sometimes become void and is not a real loss. But you would not have moved here without real motivation, but perhaps for some, without much understanding of what this community is. There are two sets of purpose for this community. One is that it facilitates your spiritual awareness development. That is mostly because of the ample opportunity for contemplation. But there is also some guidance and understanding available from the elders. But that cannot substitute for your capacity to discover patterns of psyche and your capacity to discover incremental transformation of false self-awareness and transformation of false awareness of your world. You would not be here if you did not have that capacity. But here that capacity for spiritual awareness will grow. That growth is much more from the realm of spiritual causality than it is from you. So your resistance is natural, but will decrease. So you will not necessarily know if you are growing in spiritual awareness and the capacity for incremental transformation. To be blunt, if you are here, that is what is occurring, even if you doubt it. That is because that is a major aspect of the purpose of this community. Obviously, millions of others outside this community are also in growth of spiritual awareness. And if you should leave this community, almost certainly you will continue to grow in spiritual awareness. This is just a tiny spiritual community out of a multiplicity and diversity of others. But this is ours. We are blessed to be here. Now, obviously, this community is unique. Thus, the second major aspect of purpose for this community is what contributes to its unique patterns as a community. Now, always we have to remember God creates all the multiplicity and diversity of spiritual community. So what patterns we have are not necessarily better, but are providential for us. Now, to be blunt, this community is part of the evolution of new patterns of cultural awareness, but we must remain humble. God is creator of all life, all people, all of human civilization. Cultural evolution includes status quo, what is in decay, and what is in growth, which is all in diversity. And there is much interrelationship within that diversity, hence great complexity. The small stage lowered until it was flush with the larger stage, and Mary sat on a chair to the side of the musicians, who were for some minutes the focus of the audience. The music increased in volume, and melodic lines became more distinct, but still interwove as each gained prominence for a few moments. The music was impossible to categorize. Its influences from West and East, African and Latin American, but really beyond a fusion, so that it was a unique expression from musicians who developed it over 2 decades in Oakport. Mary walked back to the small stage and arose before she spoke again. Brothers and sisters, it is crucial that we maintain humility at the same time as we discover the unique qualities of what we have been given by God, our Mother, in this church. The American New Millennium Church has a purpose: to contribute to the evolution of human spiritual awareness by developing new cultural metaphors for communicating spiritual reality. This is a necessary aspect of human history. All religions that now seem intrinsic to human civilization were once new developments. It's obvious that human civilization has changed rapidly over the past 2 centuries as far as secular culture, especially those fields of knowledge that have yielded industry and technology. But although religion has evolved, religion is to some extent archaic. Thus, many are concerned that religious influence on secular culture has decreased, and that secular culture is decadent, and thus human spiritual awareness has decreased. For some, that is a source of anxiety. But increasing zealotry for traditional religion is only adopted by some, and is usually ignored by the dominant secular culture. Thus, new spiritual cultural awareness must develop that is superior to secular culture and can eventually have integration within an evolving total societal culture. There are a lot of new spiritual cultural communities contributing to that evolution, and we are a very small part of that. Thus, we cannot know how our contribution will have effect. Thus, our focus is not on its effect, but on what it is, for we are discovering it incrementally all the time. So it is important that you realize that as individuals, your spiritual awareness development contributes to community spiritual and cultural awareness development. Conversation is an aspect of community. Your awareness has a great effect within the conversation, both as listening and speaking. Someone knows if they are understood by you, and you cannot understand if you have no degree of common awareness. As far as the work of the elders, we cannot teach what you have no capacity to know. To a large extent, your contemplation is where almost all of what you learn develops. Your struggle with false self is similar to everyone's struggle with false self. Your development of transcendent awareness is similar to others. But the differences are also important. Thus, community awareness is intense because it incorporates different individuals. Now, our job as elders is also to help the church continue to grow in spiritual cultural awareness. Thus, we will limit the development of too much, for lack of a better word, groupism. In other words, community awareness that is self-centric. Thus, the job of this church is to contribute eventually to the larger society. Society is indirectly subsidizing this community by the commerce of Omaha Eagle Corporation. It is the large stock ownership of Omaha Eagle by the new Oakport Corporation that is the source of the funding of New Oakport. So both spiritual and social providential blessing allows us to be here. It is both a gift and a subtle debt that we must eventually repay. Thus, our spiritual cultural discovery is not just for ourselves, but eventually for others. Eventually. So, do not focus on if or what or how others may learn from us. Our job is to continually improve our level of spiritual awareness, not by an effort of will, but by humility and patience. Knowing that Holy Spirit is working within us, thus we are in a higher level purgatory. New Oakport is not New Jerusalem. All of you have gone through your own development and levels of purgatory before, so you know what it is. Thus you have some capacity for responsibility as you develop, but we will help you as possible. As most of you know, New Oakport was supposed to be a full community of families and commerce and was to be much larger. It was originally thought of as another Oakport, but it turned out that was a fantasy and impossible to bring into being. Thus, this new Oakport is of much less concern to most of the people of Oakport. To them, it is an historical accident. But it is a providential reality because it has purpose. Spiritual purpose is not obvious to secular community. The success of secular community seems to be purpose of human life. And focus, concern, attention is mostly on secular community. And thus emotional awareness corresponds to the attitudes and assumptions people have while in participation within secular community. Thus, to gain perspective on secular awareness, and perhaps to gain some experiential alternative to the limitations of secular awareness, various religious awareness communities can be learned from or perhaps joined. The American New Millennium Church is a very small religious community. Most of you have been part of a larger church, the New World Church Oakport. Thus, as much as we owe great gratitude to the New World Church Oakport, within which this church was formed, we are a distinct church because we are very different. The New World Church is part of Oakport. Its members who live in Oakport contribute to the town and are nurtured by the town. One key to the success of the church is its diversity of worship culture, and that diversity interrelates with the diversity of culture in Oakport and beyond. Thus, the comprehensive culture of the church or the town is not known. It may not exist. Mostly people accept that cultural diversity is necessary and a welcome opportunity for exploration. It may not occur to anyone that cultural comprehensive awareness is impossible. Unfortunately, in order to even attempt to develop comprehensive awareness, we must form this separate community in relative isolation. Thus, although we must develop a high level of spiritual awareness, that is not why this church is the way it is. It is more how we develop a unique cultural knowledge community. Now, everything is interrelated. Thus, our community will develop in many ways, both obvious and obscure. We are all involved in the discovery process, which inherently is collaborative. Thus, all contribute, and quiet participation is as important as spoken. Thus, the goal is a continual increase in community wisdom. Individual wisdom is of value as it contributes to the community. But also, it is the community that affirms what is wise and rejects what is foolish. Do not be afraid to have revealed any of your foolishness. That is not avoidable, for we have all grown up in a civilization full of false awareness and false understanding. Thus, an aspect of purgatory is that we must unlearn what is false. Not only because as individuals we have adopted false awareness, but because humanity, in its diversity of societies, has adopted false awareness. Behind what is false is massive ignorance. Thus, to learn a higher level of knowledge of reality, you must accept ignorance. Thus, Holy Spirit teaches us as individuals and community. Although about a tenth of its membership and about a quarter of its staff left the New World Church Oakport to form the New Millennium American Church at New Oakport, Nebraska, the New World Church continued as vibrant as before. New staff was hired from within the church. Only some had sadness that colleagues and friends had left. Many had excitement for the new church. It was a validation for the New World Church that the anticipated goal of building New Oakport had finally been accomplished, even if at a smaller scale than originally conceived. Some knew that the American New Millennium Church was an elite spiritual community, but they also knew that those who remained in Oakport had their purpose and contribution to others. Mostly those who may have wanted to go but stayed had too much responsibility to family and others at home, or knew that they could not tolerate the relative isolation. In any case, New Oakport had only limited capacity. Not everyone who may have wanted to join could do so, but most people in Oakport did not even consider going.